Hello, I'm Mary Rose Bacani, and welcome to Catholic Focus. Today's show deals with autism, which is a lifelong developmental disorder more common now than Down syndrome or multiple sclerosis. We'll be looking at a few stories on autism with today's guests, who are Heather Kidd, who's a member of the Autism Spectrum Disorder team, along with her colleague, Richard Goff, from the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Now, before we start off our discussion, I'd like to hear a few words from Dr. Temple Grandin, who knows autism from the inside. Dr. Temple Grandin is argued to be the most accomplished and well-known adult with autism in the world. Aside from being a professor who speaks about autism and handling livestock, which is her hobby, she's an author. Her book, Thinking in Pictures, gave an inside narrative of what the world of autism is like.
One of the things I like about being autistic is there's a clarity of thought. You see, I think in details. I think in detailed pictures. Well, when I was 3 years old, I had the full-blown symptoms of autism. I had no language. I would just sit and rock. Well, when I was in high school, I was trying to visualize what life would be like after high school. See, I don't have any abstract thinking, so I have to think in pictures. So I actually had doors that I used as symbols as going on for the next step in my life. Now I don't use those now because I have enough images in my mind from all kinds of other experiences that I can pull up those other images. You know, my mind's sort of like, I have my own internet inside my head, and the more information that gets put in here, then my own search engine in my head can search it and find a similar situation. You know, in my field, working with the meat industry, I see many mild Asperger's all over the place that are my age, 40s, 50s, 60s years old, in jobs like plant engineer, head of maintenance, drafting and design. And one of the things that helped them was being taught much more rigidly about manners. Then you have the people that are very severe. They're nonverbal. They're going to have to live in a group home or some other, totally supervised situation for the rest of their life. Autism's a huge continuum, going from somebody that's going to have to live in a supervised situation to a brilliant scientist. In fact, if you didn't have autism genetics, we wouldn't even have airplanes. You wouldn't have TV cameras. Because after all, the really social people didn't want to sit in the back of a cave and make the first stone spear.
I thought it was really fascinating that Dr. Grandin mentioned that she has clarity of thought and thinks in detailed pictures. Can you talk about autism and how this is so with autistic individuals?
Well, the issue of thinking in pictures, that's a term that's echoed around the whole autism community since Temple Grandin wrote her book, and that's very clearly one of the key pieces of gaining insight into how their minds work. I think one of the successes she has is being able to organize that internal world she has in terms of thinking in pictures. Our kids so often get distracted by that as well. They can really quite live inside their head in terms of all that visual stuff that's going on inside.
So you describe autism as a state where you're always thinking visually, or how would you describe that?
Well, it's there's a variety of things that go on with autism.
It is a neurological development, and I think that that's something that is very important to stress, because historically there have been many other views as to the causes of autism. We know it's neurologically based, and we know that it's characterized by a triad of impairments. Those impairments include qualitative impairments in communication, social development and socialization, and the third triad is a rigidity or stereotypical behavior and interests.
So how do you support students with autism, for example, in the school board?
There's a variety of things that we do. We have quite a few different layers of response to their needs. The school itself has a special education team. We're another layer to that as a resource to the schools, bringing to the school information about current practices, about current research. Part of our role as part of the ASD team is to go to those conferences that are out there and to pick up the books and make sure we read them through and see where things are heading in terms of best practice, and then bring that to the schools.
Now, I know that you mentioned too that in your board you've adopted the biblical quote from Isaiah, each one called by name, to guide, I guess, teachers in student achievement. How does that apply to students with autism?
Well, it was an interesting point that came up, because as we develop our resources, we're asked to link it back to board initiatives and board policy. The whole thrust in education in our board for special education is the board plan for improvement of student achievement. That's where that quote was placed in as a guiding piece to the catholicity of the board's efforts to assist children to achieve. As we look at each one called by name, we're thinking about, wow, this disorder is a communication disorder. That's one of the key highlights to it. So where does that, how do we bring these children forward in terms of the guidelines that we're being asked to use in terms of being called by name? Children with more severe autism, sometimes they don't even respond to their own name. In terms of building that community that is school, in conjunction with, and in conjunction with the family, how does that whole issue of communication impact these children? How well do they respond? How well do they understand our world, and how well do we understand their world?
Now, do people understand how common autism is? How common is it?
The statistics vary slightly, but anywhere from 1 to 165 individuals, with the majority being boys. The ratio is 4 to 1, 4 boys to every 1 girl. In terms of how common it is, I think it's very difficult to pick up a newspaper these days without reading in the media, movies, television shows. Autism has become a real focus in recent years.
Well, you know what? I remember that you brought up the whole spectrum that Dr. Grandin spoke about. So I want to discuss more of that whole spectrum. But before we do that, I'd like to take a look at the lives of 2 young men from opposite ends of the spectrum. The first one is Simon Yunan, who has Asperger's syndrome. So let's take a look at his story.
During my day, I have 4 periods and a lunch. On my first period, I have science. On my second period, I have gym. On my third period, A and B, I have English. And then I have my lunch break. And then for my 4th period, I have math. I am very good at it. It's easy for me.
Simon is highly high functioning in mathematics and science. He can comprehend math problems and equations that are way beyond his years. Not only that, but he's able to find the minute details in the micro of any situation. Because Simon is special, he has gifts that not every other student has. I mean, some of his strengths are in areas that most of us can't comprehend.
The ERWs have been wonderful in creating visual schedules for him because they are visual learners. If he had to do presentations, we would cue him ahead of time what was expected. We would practice, they would practice with him.
What I try and do is just give him, like I said, the support and an opportunity to foster his development as a person. Like, I want him to feel that he can be himself, to bridge his mental awareness and his creative awareness.
It's the little things that we have to teach Simon. It's all those the hidden social cues that he doesn't pick up that we have to pre-teach.
Simon's mom, Brigida, found out that Simon had autism when he had a psychological assessment done in kindergarten.
The test revealed that he is high functioning because of the certain things he can do. At a young age, he was able to do puzzles very well and putting blocks together. And school, he's mostly trying to get his work done as quickly as possible, so he has time to play his favorite computer games or watch some TV and read books and magazines he likes.
Simon's home has several pictures of himself with his younger sister and his parents, but there are also several plaques and acknowledgments of Simon's intellectual talents.
To contrast, before we go into any further discussion, after looking at Simon's story, I'd like to look at the story of Domenico Sansalone, who is at the other end of the spectrum from Simon.